Hi, everybody. This is Sanjay Swami here. Welcome again to a new episode of the Prime Venture Partners podcast. I have with me a very close friend and an amazing executive that many of you would have read and heard about, Kirthiga Reddy, who is probably best known to the startup ecosystem for her path-breaking work that she did at Facebook when she was setting it up in India. But I've had the privilege of knowing her even pre that, and really a pleasure to have you here on the show, Kirthiga. Welcome.
Sanjay, pleasure to be here. I remember talking about the Facebook decision with you about what I should do. And oh my, the places we have been, from that decision to then joining SoftBank as their first female investment partner to now launching a SPAC. It's been quite a journey, and it's been great to see Prime Ventures' evolution during that time and the amazing founders and companies that you work with.
Well, thank you. And, it's been great to sort of interact with you over the years. But let's rewind the clock a little bit for our listeners here. Would be helpful for people to know, a little bit about your background, where you grew up and schooling and your early professional days. And then we can get to, how you got to Facebook and all that.
I grew up in a lot of different places in India. My family moved every 3 to 4 years. My father was not in the army, not in the military, as people usually ask me, and he actually worked for the same company, Lloyd Steel, for 30 years. As they opened new steel plants across the country, he traveled with them. My mom thinks he just had a travel bug. And as they say, that kind of upbringing makes for very adaptable adults. Mostly in Maharashtra, Sanjay, so Pune, Nagpur, Nasik, Tarapur, Mumbai, a few years in Dandeli, a few years in Chennai. Of course, my mom now is in Chennai. My mother-in-law is in Bangalore. So those are some of my coordinates. I did my engineering in Nanded, my computer science and engineering degree. And my family believed that if there was an engineering school in the neighborhood, that's where their daughter would go to. When I cried about not having the opportunity to go to different places, my father said, you can go to an incredible institution and do nothing with that opportunity, or make the most of the opportunity in front of you. And sure enough, when I actually stood second rank in the university at the end, which, by the way, no one was more surprised than I was, I think it was just a recognition of the advice he gave me, that life is about making the most of the opportunities given to you. And that's something that I take with me in my life and my work.
That's a wonderful message already for all the listeners here. So what did you end up doing after your undergrad?
My family waited for the day I finished my undergrad education and then promptly moved to Nagpur. That was the longest we stayed in any one location, I think, for me to finish my education. I then worked for Yashwant Kanedkar, that the engineering crew in this audience will recognize as the author of Let Us See. He was a textbook that was used in many institutions. And I helped him with, he had software, antivirus software. I often tell my kids my first job included writing new viruses so that we could test the antivirus software. And so be careful of what you do. So from that journey, Sanjay, I wanted to then pursue further education, wanted to come to the United States to do my master's in computer engineering. My father beamed and said, matter of pride for the family, first person in the family to go abroad. He took a 4 lakh loan to help enable that. My mother beamed and said, get married and do whatever you want. And so that's when started the search for the perfect groom. And when I met Dave, and here I am now in the United States, 2 wonderful girls, 19 and 16, and a wonderfully supportive husband.
That's awesome. So you got to you moved to the US, and did you go to school? Did you start working?
Yeah. So I did my engineering in Syracuse University, upstate New York. Actually, I'm back there this year to give their convocation address, which I think is one of the most meaningful events for this year, including, of course, this podcast, Sanjay. So,
to an elite company, yeah.
And then we promptly moved to the Bay Area, the place to be for technology roles. My first decade of my career was in engineering. So I worked with Silicon Graphics in the high performance computing space. When I joined, they were a 9,000 people, $2 billion company. And Sanjay, that's when I learned an early business lesson. You know, about 10 years after its high, which was much after I was there, the company actually went bankrupt, right? And it was a very early lesson for me that phenomenal technology and phenomenal engineers alone does not make for a high growth sustainable businesses. Because when I was there, truly, our customers would come tell us that no one would solve their problem like we did. And I remember the first all hands where the CFO said, we have so much money, we don't know what to do with it. Whenever you have a CFO say that, know that that's your sign of decline. Because honestly, from how I see it, we got complacent, did not see the competition coming. So that was an early lesson and something that has been instrumental in terms of how I think about building high growth, sustainable business from that point on. So did that. And then to fast forward, then I then got my MBA at Stanford because I really wanted to dig deeper on the business side. I transitioned to product management, saw the mobile shift with good technology that was acquired by Motorola. And it was that acquisition and Motorola that brought me back to India. I thought we were coming for a 1.5-year assignment, and I came with my wonderfully supportive husband, Dave, and my 2 girls who were then 3 and 5, which then led to the foundation for the Facebook role.
Right. No, I think I guess the point you made about Silicon Graphics, and we see that also, with startups as well, right, that keep raising round after round, but at the same time, still have a lot to prove, right? And sometimes success gets to your head. And I remember working in the Bay Area as well at the same time, and Silicon Graphics was really the most aspirational company to get into. And they did some of the most amazing things, and most people of this generation have not heard of that company, right? Except probably a Wikipedia page.
And Sanjay, what's even more ironic, the office that I used to use at Silicon Graphics is now the Google office. Okay. Actually, the Google office, but they used to compete with Sun Microsystems,
right?
And Sun Microsystems campus is now the Facebook office,
right?
So it's just a tale of what every one of us as entrepreneurs, founders need to be very cognizant of. If you go to Facebook headquarters even today, you will see, or at least there was a like sign. I don't know. I think now there's a Meta logo, but behind that is still the original Sun Microsystem logo, because it's a reminder from Mark where he wants us to always remember that if we are not on top of what our users want, where the technology trends are going, any company could be the sign behind another fast-growing company.
That's really, it's really amazing to hear, because I think one needs to remain grounded, right? And we're all these companies are sort of work in progress at any point in time. So let's talk about you talked a little about Facebook. Let's talk about how you got there. And certainly the first part was here in India, and then the second part was of your career was in Facebook headquarters. So yeah, tell us about those exciting times.
Sure. So we were in India, thinking we were here for a 1.5 years, really enjoyed our time in India, could see the pace of growth, new infrastructure, new airports being built. I was there. My husband actually landed in the first flight that landed in the new Hyderabad International Airport. And it was a matter of national pride. There were tolaks and it was music. It was just incredible. To us, then, it was that growth that we were seeing in the country and wanting to be part of that nation building that led us to think about wanting to be in India longer. I then got an introduction to Sheryl Sandberg through a business school classmate. Came to the United States, met with her, told her about how much Facebook has been so key in my life as I moved to India. That was my mechanism of staying connected with my near and dear in the US, as well as reconnecting with people in India who had lost touch with for a while. And I said, would love to be part of building your operations in India. So we explored a few different roles. I met with Shamat, with Javier, who ran growth, met with Chris Cox, their chief product officer. We explored a few different roles, and we said, Sheryl said, one day we'll open an office in India, and let's keep in touch. It was almost a year after that initial meeting, Sanjay, and I then joined Phoenix Technology, which was a turnaround company. I worked with Gaurav Banga, who I'd known from my good technology days. And it almost seemed meant to be in hindsight, because it was in April of 2010 that we, as part of the turnaround, sold the businesses that we were working on. And it was that March that Facebook announced its intention to open an office in India. So there was then a grueling interview process where it felt like everyone and their brother and their sister were applying for the role naturally. And I felt very blessed to have the opportunity to join as employee number one and be their managing director of Facebook India and eventually South Asia. So that was my journey. And I also at that time had the option of joining another internet giant as their head of India operations. And it wasn't an easy decision. I knew I wouldn't go wrong in either path, but the pull of building and doing something from the very beginning, the mission that Facebook had of giving people the power to share and making the world more open and connected, and truly the people were just stand out, and it was something that I knew I wanted to put my heart, soul, mind into, Sanjay.
Super.
And yeah.
So, how long did you spend with Facebook India, and what were some of the key things you focused on doing at the time, and how was that phase of your Facebook stay?
So Facebook India had 3 different charters. One, there was a global charter, one of 4 of Facebook's global operations centers that serves their now 3.5 billion users and their developers and their advertisers is in India. So we first built that, and that was a global charter. Second, Asia Pacific SMB business started, the focus started from India, and eventually as it grew to a few hundred million, we moved that center of gravity to Singapore, but there was very much a regional charter as well. And then 3, of course, there was a market charter. And what is it that we wanted to do in India, which is probably most relevant for this for the audience today. And there, the initial focus was, of course, the user side is how is it that we grow the user base on Facebook on the platform. And then there were teams that were focused on, okay, once they come on the platform, how is it that we make sure that every moment there is the most valuable moment for them? And that's where our partnerships with Bollywood and sports and language localization and a number of other features or capabilities or initiatives came into play. And then there was the monetization team. And Sanjay, what we did early on in that market side, and it was a very cross-functional team. Facebook, like most other global corporations, is organized functionally, which meant that at any one point of time, what I was directly managing reported indirectly to me. Everything else was, direct line to regional and to headquarters. So, HR reported in regionally, user growth reported in regionally and globally. But having that joint mission of the market really brought us together. And our initial mission, our BHAG that we put out was for the India market was 100, 100, 100. And if this was live, I would ask the audience to guess what that 100, 100, 100 BHAG was. And maybe I'll ask you to guess what that 100, 100, 100 BHAG is.
I'm guessing 100 million users.
Okay.
$100 million of revenue, perhaps. Although that would probably be very small for Facebook, but at the time might have been material. And I don't know, an NPS of 100.
So, all right, very, very close. And yes, so remember, this is a time where there were not even 100 million people on the internet, right? And by the way, this was not too long ago. This was 2010 in India. And so the first one was indeed, and we had 8 million people on the platform at Facebook in India. So 100 million was the number of users in 4 years. 100 million, the next 100 million is also a check. It is revenue. And by the way, at that time, we didn't even have a revenue focus. We didn't even have plans for hiring a sales team. The user base at 8 million did not justify hiring a sales team. We had a very strong partnership with Homely at that time as a reseller partner. But the second 100 was 100 million in revenue. And the third 100 was 100 million people that we wanted to touch with our community efforts, right? Whether it was our work with releasing Safety Check that helps you, mark yourself safe in the case of a disaster, which we saw. I think the first time we released it was when there was the Nepal earthquake in that region. So those were our 3 goals, and these were true BHAGs. But the power of a big, bold vision, it was something that every early Facebooker will remember, 100, 100, 100. And it was something that brought the teams together, and give or take a few quarters, we hit each one of those goals within that 4-year time frame.
Spectacular.
Yeah. So from there, then Sanjay again continued to grow the business. The business now, India, crossed $1 billion in revenue. Kudos to the team there. But beyond all of those numbers, Sanjay, just being part of a country that was going digital, going mobile, and seeing the impact that it had on people, businesses, societies, economies was truly transformational and satisfying. And that's the spirit of transformation that I bring to each of my founder conversations in my current avatar, as I hear their visions and get so excited about what they're doing and visualize the impact that what they're doing is going to have on how they're going to transform how we live and work.
Spectacular. So a little more on Facebook before we get to the next phase of your amazing journey. Some insights in terms of org building, company building, handling crises. When you're obviously it's a company that especially now, but even earlier on, has always had to sort of balance introducing services and this from time to time question marks around privacy policies and this and that, and at the end of the day you still have to keep building and moving forward, right? So some insights, anecdotes that you can share.
Certainly. Some things that come to mind as you ask those questions. One was an early lesson when the first time the executive team from Facebook Global was visiting after we started the India office. Of course, the team was very excited about their visit. And I started the presentation with talking about the business impact that the team was having. And the executive team actually stopped me, and this was Grady Burnett at that time. And he said, Kirthiga, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I want you to first tell me, how are you building the right culture? How are you hiring the right people? Because if you build the right culture, hire the right people, business results will come. Okay. Nowhere in my 20+ year career had I ever, of course, I've been asked about people and culture, but not in that priority or not in that order with that emphasis. And as my good friend Rajesh Rani says, business models can change dime a dozen, but culture is very difficult to change. And while this might seem like, I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, do I really have the time to think about culture? Everything that you do in the company, how you work, how you interact, how you make decisions, how you handle conflict is culture. So you might as well be deliberate about it from the very beginning. So that was a aha moment for me. And I really spent a lot of time understanding what it means for culture building. And that paid off in spades in terms of how we built our business, Sanjay. For example, like be open. So for us, at that time in Facebook India, culture building was around values. Be open was one of our key values. And it was not, there's one set of way that you do that and you say, yes, it is important to us, but it's really the depth of how much you focus on it that makes the difference. So in this case, we train people on constructive criticism. How do you give feedback? We used to have feed forward session. It's like speed dating. You come in and you say one thing you do well, 3 things that you could do better, just to build the muscle of being able to give constructive feedback. Why wait for a 6-month review period to tell people about what you can do better, where you can be making those changes every single day? So that's one. 2, an early advice from Cheryl, as I said, Cheryl, your advice on how do I make the largest impact, where she said, you're going to be leading many functions that you have not grown up in. So I didn't grow up, for example, in the operations world. I grew up in the engineering and the product world. I didn't grow up in the sales world. She said, make sure you understand what the nitty-gritty of that function is, because that is what will give you the power to operate at the 20,000, 30,000 foot level. So every week I used to have like shadow sessions with my operations team and really understand what's going on, like what's coming in. Like I still vividly remember we had teams that made sure that the content on the site is safe and does not violate our policies. And of course, there was a lot of machine learning AI used to weed out a lot of that, but there was some that could not be caught. And so it needed human review. And I still remember like images that still traumatize me, right? And those are the kind of things that we had to do. So the empathy that I had and the understanding of the problem was very different for me, because I really knew what was going on at the grassroots level that could then let me, drive policies, strategies at the high level. So those are some thoughts. And then fast forward then, Sanjay, I'll say when the IPO happened, it was a moment of deep pride for the company because it's a milestone in the company's journey. But then, of course, if you remember, the stock price shot significantly, and the company was under huge stress about not having a mobile monetization strategy. And two lessons there. One, that focus that Mark and the executive team drove, and where they said, we have to stay focused on our mission and really, of course, listen to the message. I saw one of the most swift transformations I've seen a company take to focus on that mobile challenge, where we changed organizational structure. There was no more a mobile department or a mobile version or a desktop version. They were all combined to one. The amount of training that the engineers went to gain mobile skills, because we couldn't hire that many people that quickly. Mark used to, if people came in with a product idea, if you didn't start with a mobile version, he would literally stop the meeting, right? So those were the kind of changes that were very systematic, and we drove the change pretty phenomenally.
And this is in a post-IPO company.
This is in a post-IPO company, right? And then we also put posters. There's a big sense of, what's seen visually impermeates your psyche, either consciously or not. But we had posters that says, stay focused and keep shipping. And just staying focused and keep shipping was an important part of, the ethos of the company, Sanjay.
No, these are amazing.
And I could go on, but
I'm sure you can, and
just
I would love for you to. But I think people sort of, not everybody gets to experience what you did at Facebook, right? And I think some of those lessons, apply to companies even at the seed stage when it's two founders and one engineer, and of course have to carry on. And I think one of the couple of things that obviously we worked a lot with Jamaat also over the years. Few things he would say is that we're always, I think we're only 1% done or something. That was also a slogan at any stage of the company, right? It was always that, so that you don't get complacent. And the other thing I read somewhere was also about Mark making the point that people had to think about any hire onto their team as if in an alternate universe you were reporting to this person, would you want to work for them, right? And think about that when you bring anybody into the company. And I think some of these thinking, which is sort of doing these things at scale, is I think what makes some of these companies go from good to great and iconic. Really.
Yeah, and some other quick anecdotes. One, Mark did and still does every Friday Q&A, and as the company grew and scaled, as we did surveys of the company of what was the most important source of quote unquote truth or keeping people together, it was that Q&A that Mark used to do. Of course, it used to be at an ungodly hour for India, so it used to be tape, and we used to all watch it again together as a team on Monday, and I used to have the opportunity to answer questions. So just that power of communication in keeping a global team together, and that consistency with which he did it, and the encouragement that he gave to ask the tough questions. This was truly not I'm doing this to keep everyone happy. I truly wanted to hear about the hardest questions in your mind. And it was a very powerful mechanism. So that's one. As Facebook went through its many PR crises, again, the focus on learning very quickly, but as Mark used to say, when the press is all negative about you, things internally might not be as bad as they seem. And conversely, when people are writing about you as the next best thing to slice bread, things internally are not as rosy as they may be. So you, again, just have to stay focused on what you're doing, who you're serving, and continue to move forward. And the last quick anecdote is, when the Russian interference happened, I remember the message that certainly Facebook as a company, but we as an industry need to do a lot more in thinking about what happens if the platform is being used for just sheer evil. People don't, of course, think about like test cases, what can go wrong, but the intensity of how you think about what happens if this goes into the hands of someone with a purely destructive purpose is something that Facebook needs to do more about, and the industry needs to do more about. So as everyone here is building systems with AI, data, all of the questions of ethics, just tackle that head on and think about that consciously, because things are just, again, very difficult to change later. So think about it from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think that applies also, especially, we do a lot in fintech, and almost all the companies are anyway data companies these days, right? So there's also a lot of balancing between even for employees, right, to ensure that data doesn't get out of their test systems, for example, and things like that. I think we've seen companies that are going through M&A, right, and they the buyer looks at the users and says, hey, your QA system had real customer data, right? And how do you know that wasn't exposed to an ethical to a hacker or something like that? So I think companies also, as these problems, as the opportunity and the scale expands, I think putting in those checks and balances very early becomes critical as well. Terrific. I'm sure, and I know you've shared several anecdotes over the years as we have met. And, the logical thing one would have thought after Facebook is, hey, you would probably, take a break, perhaps even retire, travel the world, or, become another entrepreneur and, get started. But, you surprised everyone by getting into, investing, and that was late stage investing with your stint at SoftBank. So how did that come about, and what were some of your experiences from that journey, that phase?
Sure. So after Facebook in India, we relocated to Facebook in headquarters. And frankly, that was more a personal decision. My girls were starting high school and middle school. So we said, as much fun as we were having building Facebook in India, if we ever had to come back, that was the right time to come back. By the way, they both told us, as you know, that we are ruining their lives by bringing them from India to the United States, because, again, India was what they had known. That's where they had their friends, and that's where they wanted to stay. Fast forward 5 years, they're just so beautifully settled. And I think the gift of being able to call two countries home is just, I personally believe, the best gift that I as a parent could have given them. So came back to Facebook with headquarters. I worked on an emerging markets role. So worked with South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, Middle East, and I really had a blast every single day. But then I started missing the startup ecosystem. I started missing the building. It was a very hard decision for me to leave Facebook. And I the last 6 months after I told them that I wanted to leave, and we were working out the right transition, I cried every single day saying, oh my God, am I really going to leave a company that I love so much, and people that I love so much, and products that I love working on? But I went through all of that emotion over the 6 months, but I knew it was the right time for me to figure out my next challenge. After Facebook, I first started a seed fund with 6 other female Facebook executives called F7 Ventures. We were investing off our own pool capital, which I would actually, as women, think about angel investing, and I would encourage as a mechanism for doing more and more of that. It's one thing to write your own angel checks, but what this allowed us to do is, one, be able to do more with that pooled dollars, and two, have a set of like-minded people that we could bounce ideas off of and get just sharper with what we were investing in. So I did that. And some of those conversations actually led me to SoftBank. I actually thought I would go be a CEO of an early stage startup after I left Facebook. But then as I was talking to a few venture firms about their portfolio companies, and the question came up about whether I would consider investing full time, the opportunity with SoftBank was one that was just one of those yet another once in a lifetime opportunities. One, there was Deep Nishar, who was the former chief product officer at LinkedIn, and I know a common friend, someone I've known for 10 years. And people just are such an important equation in how I make a decision. And I remember Deep saying, in an operating career, you get to see transformations sequentially, but in an investing career, you get to see such transformations at the same time across the globe. And that whole framework was very appealing. If you know Deep, he's very persuasive. And of course, what SoftBank was doing, the scale, the might, and how they were shaping industries and the whole thesis of AI and data changing the world. So joined SoftBank, and now look back on 3 incredible years with SoftBank, managed a portfolio of over 5 billion and investments. My focus was enterprise, health tech, frontier tech, and gaming. My last investment was actually a crypto NFT investment that is yet to be announced. But the gamut of that and scale of those technology transformations that I got to see, the founders that I got to work with, the transformations that each one of them were driving, it was just, again, lived up and more to that once in a lifetime experience, Sanjay. 2 new unicorns, 3 companies publicly listed, including joining the board of WeWork as part of their business turnaround and seeing that phenomenal journey led by Sandeep, the CEO. And Marcelo as chairman, leading up to the IPO last year. So if there was one takeaway, actually I'd also highlight when you said, how did that happen? Cheryl's advice of make sure that you understand the nitty-gritty was actually a key thing that I thought about even as I moved into investing. And so for some of my few initial deals, I did, all of my modeling myself, got cap IQ, did everything from the beginning to the end. And I'm sure like the associates, they were horrified about why am I doing this and why are they not doing it? And I asked them more questions and took more time of them than they could have done it themselves. But it was just super important for me to understand all of the nitty gritty of how late stage investing works, so that I could then, spend the time needed on the investment thesis and the right terms with the founder, and so that was again an important theme that continued to play out through my different roles.
That's wonderful. And any anecdotes from your interactions with founders that you could share? Most of these companies are well known around the world, so I'm sure our listeners would love to hear any.
So I have learned so much from each one of the entrepreneurs and founders that I work with. With Sandeep, it was his ability to make really bold changes. When I joined the board, Marcelo had 5-year strategic turnaround plan, and when Sandeep came on board, he actually said, why are we taking these many years to drive the cost down? Let's just rip the Band-Aid. And we went through a pretty deep restructuring process. And that started before COVID. If we hadn't done that, I think we would have just had a much harder time with COVID than we did. So just the ability to be bold and be transformative, and just stay very, very ruthlessly focused on the business and the economic side of things was just phenomenal. From Ashutosh Garg, who is the founder of Eightfold.ai, which is a talent intelligence platform. We spoke earlier, Sanjay, in this podcast about the perils of AI and data being misused, but this is a beautiful example of AI and data for good. So they have an AI-first platform that helps with talent matching. It puts people in the center. And you can upload your resume and the system looks at the thousands of jobs that are so chaotically organized and surfaces the 5 that are the best match for you. What that does is, there's all this research about men, if they see 60% match in the job description, they think that they're the next best things to slice bread for that role. This is just research. This is not me saying it. And women need to see 100% match. So what's happening with this tool is it's surfacing jobs to diverse candidates, and the candidate are saying, really, I am a good match for this role? I would not even thought thought of applying for this, right? So some of the companies are reporting like an over 50% increase in their diversity hiring because of the use of this, right? So I love to think about that, the use about AI for data for good. And there are so many examples like that where they came from. So it's just very inspiring to see all the visions and then to play a small part in helping make those visions come true and how they're transforming how we live and work.
Super. No, and I think AI, just from our experiences also here with certainly healthcare in particular, where we're seeing companies like M5 and Dozy in our portfolio that really are helping with better diagnosis, and making access to high quality, reliable healthcare, in corners where you might not have the right level of medical support, physically, actual doctors. And with diagnostics, in one of our companies, Dozy as well, that we've talked about, really being able to surface potential problems with patients earlier, much earlier, right? So I think and we're just getting started, right? So I think so much is going to be ahead of us, and I think the quality of care possible is definitely going to be a lot better. And of course, education is another area where we see again a lot of this coming about.
Totally, yeah. And as you speak about healthcare, Sanjay, like one of the other companies that I invested in, Pear Therapeutics, they are creating a new category of medicine, software as medicine, and their targets are serious psychiatric diseases as the first starting point: substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, chronic insomnia. The challenges of tomorrow are going to require very multidisciplinary approaches, and in this company, truly, I see that. Pharma plus technology plus medical devices and so many different disciplines come together. That's another just investment thesis of world's challenges tomorrow are going to require a number of disciplines to come together to solve these immense challenges, and it could not happen faster. And we need all entrepreneurs, founders to be bold, think bold, take bold strides to see all the changes that we need to see.
So I'll ask you the classic VC question, right? All of us have a long list of companies that we had opportunities to invest in and didn't. So what would you say was your anti-portfolio, right? We see at the seed stage you have several companies that we just can't always see what the founder is seeing, and sometimes we have doubts on timing, on the team, on the TAM, and some of these things just play out. But at the SoftBank stage, much later, a lot of things are kind of obvious that it's still going through, but obviously you still don't end up backing all companies, and some of them will still do exceptionally well. So any famous ones you can talk about that in hindsight played out much better than you imagined?
So I will not take names per se, but I will tell you general themes where we passed on gaming company and we had the opportunity to invest at a few $billion valuation. But Sanjay, I think one thing that we do well is that we then don't shy away from saying, we should have done this then. And we came in the next round at a much higher valuation, but that was a miss in that we did not see it early. Part of it is, of course, with SoftBank, given that we have the ability to write large checks, we do have the ability to let things play out. And, and if that means that we have to come up with a higher valuation, then we will. So I would probably call that one out. And maybe we'll leave it at that.
That's fine. Maybe one example is fine. Sure. Just looking at the time, it's already hit the top of the hour as what I blocked off on your time, but maybe a couple of closing questions and you can answer them together. What are you up to next? And looking back, as Steve Jobs always talks about connecting the dots, looking back, if you were to look back at, and have an opportunity to advise the Kirthiga of 20 years ago, would you have wanted to do anything differently, or, and what would that advice be for youngsters today?
So what's next? I launched my SPAC, Sanjay. So SPAC, as the audience may know, is an alternate way for companies to go public. It was a 250 million IPO, and we're looking for the right transformative company in the enterprise health tech, deep tech, fintech space to take public. So if there are people in this audience who want to refer or are companies that are rightly valued in, call it the 1.5 to 4 billion valuation range, a strong management team, proven traction, and ready to go public, we are one of the handful high quality SPACs out there that you must talk to. It is the third in a series of all female led SPACs. And it was, we created history. This is Women's History Month. So when we were the first all-female, all-immigrant team ringing the New York Stock Exchange bell earlier this year.
Amazing, congratulations.
Of people, yeah. Actually, Sanjay, mom dialed in over Zoom. And my girls were there with me on stage. They dialed in over Zoom. So it was truly emotional in terms of what that moment represented. And all the vision and mission behind that is far greater than just the financial returns that, of course, that we are indexed on for our investors. So that's on the what am I up to. I'm also spending a lot of time in the creator crypto NFT space, and this is the creation of the new internet, if you may. So lots of plans shaping up around that space. So that's what's next. And I promise, Sanjay, I will get my book done. Chapter 3 is due to my agent this month, so working on that. And I'm excited about that. I'll talk more about my journey at Facebook. You'll see some of the stories that I shared here in the book and bring in my perspectives from my other parts of my career. It's the journey of a woman in tech, and it's a celebration of all the people who helped build Facebook India. So I'm very, very excited about that book. And if I get hit by a bus, that's the one thing that I will regret not doing. So it's important that I get that done. My advice for my 20-year-old self is, and I've learned to do this over time, and I would just, state it more explicitly to my 20-year-old self, is to lean into the unknown, to lean into fears, to lean into uncertainty. I remember being offered the opportunity for doing entrepreneurship when I was in my undergrad, but I come from a service background with my father having worked with the same company for 30 years. So the whole idea of entrepreneurship at that time was very foreign to me. And I almost did not pay any attention to that. It is a regret of mine. And of course, I'm trying to make up in spades with what is it that I do in my, my later years. So I just say, lean into your fears. And it could be in any dimension. If you're worried about competition, go figure it out. You probably need to just embrace that and, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, or a new strategy that's coming, or a new direction, or a new career opportunity. So just lean into the uncertain and lean into your fears, and live a life with no regrets, live in line with your values. So
superb. I think on that very high note, thank you so much, Kirthiga, for spending such a considerable amount of time and with our podcast. I'm sure our listeners will really enjoy it, and look forward to staying in touch and tracking.
What is one thing you will remember, having the two of us having known each other for so long? What's one thing that you will remember
from
this discussion?
I think the closing comment that you made, don't be shy to lean in when you have an opportunity, take chances. I think that's true even much later in life as well. I think you never know what's behind that door unless you open it, right? And I think that's the advice I would give everybody as well. So it's totally resonated with that. Amazing. Everything else you said for the first 45 minutes was also awesome, but yeah, that was the yes, the resistance. Yes.
Well, wonderful. Well, congratulations to you, and the heart, soul, mind, spirit that you and your partners put into each of the founders that you back. It's just been such a joy to see that evolution, Sanjay. So wishing you and all the founders the very best.
Thanks, Kirthiga.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.